We dive into the top stories of the day, including the unveiling of Mayor John Whitmire's proposed city budget for Houston for 2026. I'm Ernie Manous.
And I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman. We'll also talk about a bill that could impact mom-and-pop bookstores. That's House Bill 1375 with University of Houston Law Center professor.
And we'll take a closer look at a report out of the Kinder Institute for Urban Research about the state of personal finances for the residents of Houston.
And as Ernie and I discuss the top headlines of the day, we want your thoughts, your questions, and your concerns. Give us a call at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Conclave is formally underway. Inside Vatican City, the doors have shut, leaving 133 cardinals inside the Sistine Chapel to decide who succeeds Pope Francis. He died Easter Monday at the age of 88. Earlier today, the cardinals each took a solemn oath of secrecy.
Philippus cardinalis barbarans pondeo voveo acuro, sic me deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei evangelia.
The next time the public sees them will be when a new pontiff is chosen, which will be signaled by white smoke. NPR's Jason DeRose reports on the direction of the church cardinals are weighing.
As we look at this conclave, more progressive Catholics might be delighted by someone like Pope Francis because of his focus on issues like poverty, migration, and the environment. At the same time, more conservative Catholics are looking for someone more traditional, focused on that church doctrine.
NPR's Jason DeRose. Pakistan says it will retaliate after India's military strike killed at least 26 people. Omkar Kandeka reports Indian authorities say its missiles targeted multiple locations in Pakistan to avenge attacks on its civilians last month.
Pakistan has denied the Indian Army's claims that its missiles hit, quote, terror infrastructure in Pakistan. In a statement, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said India's military had hit mosques and killed civilians, and it was an act of war. He also said that Pakistani military had brought down 5 Indian aircrafts and drones, and there would be more strikes. Tensions between the two nuclear-armed countries escalated after India accused Pakistani militant groups of carrying out an attack that killed 26 civilians in the Himalayan Valley of Kashmir last month. Pakistan denies this. Omkar Khandekar, NPR News, Mumbai.
Starting today, you will be asked for a real ID to board an airplane or enter some federal buildings in the U.S. NPR's Martin Costi reports the law has taken 20 years to implement.
The 2005 law raised standards for state IDs that are used for federally regulated activities such as flying. States had to do more to check a person's identity and print cards that are harder to counterfeit. Brian Zimmer wrote the law and then consulted on Real ID implementation. He says it also took time to outfit airports with the right technology.
These new scanners that you can find at the airport are now going to be able to recognize fakes. It's highly unlikely that more than 1 in 10,000 will pass through those scanners.
Acceptable state IDs are marked with a star or a flag, and TSA will also accept federal picture IDs such as passports. Martin Costi, NPR News.
At last check on Wall Street, the Dow was up 259 points, or roughly 0.5%. This is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. Houston Mayor John Whitmire wants to slash nearly $75 million in city spending. The cuts will bring the city's $3 billion general fund budget close to balance. News 88.7's Dominic Anthony Walsh has more on the proposed cuts.
More than $7 million from the Neighborhoods Department, $1.8 million from libraries, and more than $4 million from health. Those cuts are among the $74.5 million in slashed general fund spending from 2025 to 2026. According to a proposed budget document presented by Houston Mayor John Whitmire at a press conference on Tuesday, Whitmire promises Houstonians will still receive the services they expect and deserve.
The savings are going into the services.
While the majority of city departments would see cuts to spending, the fire department would receive an additional $23 million, and the police department would get an extra $67 million. I'm Dominic Anthony Walsh, News 88.7.
Houston City Council will review the proposals over the rest of the month. When hurricane season starts June 1st, what can Houston expect? Speaking on Hello Houston, Dr. Phil Klotzbach, a research scientist in the Department of Atmospheric Science at Colorado State University, talked about where Gulf hurricanes usually come from.
If a storm forms right off the coast of Africa, the odds of that hitting the U.S. are actually fairly low. Not that they can't, whereas if something, say, forms near the Lesser Antilles or in the Caribbean, it's likely to cause significant impacts for somebody just because it's in a region where kind of no matter which vector it takes, it's going to end up hitting somebody.
Klotzbach says the most recent prediction as of April 3rd finds a total of 17 named storms. Of those 17, 9 becoming hurricanes, and of those 9, 4 becoming major hurricanes. It's 75 degrees, a slight chance of showers before 4 p.m., a low of 69 tonight. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for use in restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
And it is a Hello Houston day for us. A little dreary
That's
out
right.
there.
Well, the sun was coming out already, Ernie.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah.
They keep us locked in the stew. We don't know what's going on in the world. But you know who does know what's going on in the world? Our comrade, who is not in studio with us today. But thanks to modern technology, that incredible phone, Frank Billingsley is with us on the line. Hello there, Frank.
Hello there. Celeste is right. I'm now deputizing her as a meteorologist.
Thank you, Frank.
Yes, you're welcome. The sun is definitely coming out. And it's actually, there's like a 10% chance of an isolated shower just because of the heat of the day. But I think we're smooth sailing into the weekend. In fact, it's going to be a nice weekend. A lot of sunshine for Saturday, Sunday. Lows will be 64, highs will be 84. But just like last weekend, it's really going to feel pretty good.
Oh, good.
So, yeah, I'm excited. So guess why I'm not there today?
You tell us.
Well, Harris County Office of Emergency Management is having a 2025 meteorologist luncheon to talk about the upcoming hurricane season and severe weather and how they are planning on addressing it and handling it. And, we used to have this luncheon every year where, in fact, Bill Wright started it with Ed Emmett. And then Anise Parker continued it, and Sylvester Turner continued it. And then it did not, I think COVID kind of put it by the wayside for a bit, because I've not been to one with Judge Hidalgo, which I'm hoping she'll be there today. So it'll be nice to meet with the officials and see exactly how they're planning, especially, there are some vacancies as far as managers down at the National Weather Service in Houston. I don't know if you've heard about that, but three or four of them took the buyouts that were offered. Right. And so our weather service down in Houston is going without true management leadership. Not that there aren't a lot of fine meteorologists down there. There are. But even, it's nice to have managers in charge, and we don't. So there's a lot to address in this. And the luncheon's 11:30 to 1. So I won't even be able to listen to you.
Oh. Well, Frank, we expect a full report when you get back.
We do.
Double-spaced, front and back of the page. And thank you, Frank. Thank you for keeping an eye on all this for us and making sure that as we move forward, then Hello Houston will have the best information about what's happening with our weather this season.
Absolutely. You guys have a great show. Love you both.
Thanks, Frank.
And Frank Billingsley, who's usually in studio with us. And you know how you know he's not in studio? Because you can go on YouTube and you can look and watch, because we stream live there every day, and you'll see his chair remains empty, but we've kept his chair right in its place.
Yes.
So it's there for you. Anyway, you can come and watch us and see what's going on by going to YouTube, and you can click on the Houston Public Media channel. I got a notification on my computer. It threw me off while I was talking.
I was trying to figure out, was that my computer?
No, it was mine. Or you can just go to hellohouston.org. There's an orange bar there that'll tell you watch live. You can click it and you can join us and see what's going on here. Remember, that's only part of it. There's a chat group that goes on at YouTube that a lot of people comment on, and so that's always good. We monitor that throughout the show, so let us know what you're thinking there, or email us, talk@hellohouston.org, or you can join the conversation texting or calling 713-440-8870.
All right. Well, we're going to pop right into our topic.
Sure. Okay. Let's
do it.
Celeste, begin us off.
Yes,
I have
that's
to say
right.
my launch line.
Houston, we have a budget, or at least a proposed one. Mayor John Whitmire presented a new Houston city budget plan to close the $330 million deficit without increasing taxes or fees. A few budget reductions will come from more than $7 million from the Neighborhoods Department, $1.8 million from libraries, and more than $4 million from health. Those cuts are among the $289 million in slashed general fund spending from fiscal year 2025 to 2026, and that's according to, again, the proposed budget document presented yesterday by Houston Mayor John Whitmire. The unveiling of the mayor's proposed budget will kick off a month-long process. So over the next 2 weeks, all city departments will be giving day-long presentations, holding budget town halls with community members, followed by a public hearing at the Houston City Council meeting on May 21st before council votes on amendments and approval of the $7 billion budget, including more than $3 billion in spending from the city's general fund. The city of Houston is expected to save about $30 million in general fund spending annually after more than 1,000 municipal workers accepted early retirement buyouts last month at an upfront cost of $1 million.
11 million.
11 million.
Yeah.
Yes, excuse me. Whitmire said the city will go through reorganization as the city looks for efficiencies, but, quote, this budget does not anticipate laying off folks. Whitmire said the budget is balanced with no deficit. The document presented by the administration, however, showed a gap of $107 million between projected revenue and expenditures. That would require tapping into the city's fund balance, essentially a savings account, which is projected to hold about $380.8 million at the end of the current fiscal year. All right, so we're calling all our numbers. People, give us a call. What do you think of Mayor Whitmire's proposed budget? 713-440-8870.
Don't you hate it when you're doing a budget and you're just off by $107 million?
I studied accounting. That's a small material cost.
Okay, without knowing all the details of the budget, so I want that to preface it.
Okay.
But I do want to say I appreciate the approach to it, unlike what we're seeing on the federal level, where we're cut, and no real thought is put into what's being done. As well as I can tell, the idea is not to increase taxes and not to lay off people. If you're going to do that, you've got to then reduce some services. And so you work through to see where is it okay to, where can other organizations pick up the slack maybe. It gives me hope that this is a thought through, balanced concept of how to do it. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, it costs a lot to run a city and we've only got so much money. And everyone doesn't want their taxes raised. I mean, there are moments where you say, yeah, I'll pay a little bit more because I believe it'll go to this, and that. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I'm curious what our listeners, what our viewers think of this budget. And I'm sure there's groups that have gone much deeper into it. And as this month-long process goes through, we'll be learning more and more of the fine details of the budget. What are you thinking,
That's
Celeste?
right. And we will have Controller Chris Hollins on again here on Hello Houston to also talk to us about some of what he thinks when we're looking at this budget. You know, I do find it interesting that Whitmire said the city will go through reorganization as the city looks for efficiencies. I would love to know what those efficiencies are. I know that there are going to be some cuts, like you said, of certain services, but it's going to be interesting how these efficiencies are not going to affect taxes and how they're anticipating that they won't have layoffs. So I think that there are going to be a lot of questions around exactly this sounds really great in theory, and you're right. I think that this is a thoughtful approach. Is it effective, and is it actually doable?
Well, and the problem, too, is when you have a thoughtful approach, my thoughts of what's important and your thoughts may be different.
Will vary.
And so trying to find the balance in that is probably the biggest problem in government. It's this side wants that side wants that. And also it's a misnomer to say this side and that side. There are so many different sides to these. We fall into this trap of Republican, Democrat, or conservative and liberal. But there's a myriad of different people with different horses in the race. And so finding that balance always is going to ruffle some feathers in your own home budget. I'm sure there are times where, well, we're not going to do that. And some family members like, no, I have to do this.
Dan has me on a budget.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you have Dan on a budget.
Right. So give us a call, 713-440-8870. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Moving along, the U.S. Supreme Court on Tuesday allowed the Trump administration to begin its ban on transgender military service members, at least for now. The justices blocked a lower court order that temporarily halted the ban's enforcement. The new policy mimics a previous transgender military ban established during the first Trump administration. The Supreme Court allowed that controversial Trump policy to remain in place in 2019, but it was reversed by President Biden shortly after he took office. What are your thoughts on the Supreme Court backing Trump's ban? Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Okay, so I did a little bit of a deep dive before when I was looking at this. And according to the Pentagon, about 0.2% of the U.S. military members experience what they call gender dysphoria. So we're talking about 4,240 service members out of approximately 2.86 million personnel worldwide. I find that just fascinating that we are drilling down on this for such a small slither.
It seems like an awful lot of work to alienate a very small number of people, you know? And we've talked about this before.
Yes.
Yes, transgender issues are extremely important, especially to those that are experiencing it or lives are touched by it. But does it deserve the attention of the general public to the degree it has gotten, to the amount of ink in headlines it gets, where it's a small group of people trying to live their lives, and it does feel a bit like an attack on them, you know? 30% of the population, I can understand them, the time we spend on it. Such a small amount. It seems like we could use our time more effectively. We were talking about budget and balancing budget.
Right.
Let's put that in perspective, too.
Right. And I think the other point to that is even taking away the, word of attack, right? Because there are some people that do feel that, we have to keep women and children safe. But to that point, there are so many other things that affect women and children and people just in general that healthcare. We're looking at healthcare. We're looking at reproductive rights, different amendments. I mean, it is one of those things where, again, like you said, we're taking a lot of energy for a very small group of people.
And when we say that, I don't ever want anyone to misunderstand that we don't think a small number of people is just as important as a large number. Person's a person, and they all deserve everything they deserve. It's just that, we need to put our priorities in order and leave people alone, or if it is an issue, if it is a concern for your organization, deal with it on a person-by-person situation.
Right. And if we took it from a percentage, if we just looked at issues and policy that are affecting people at a percentage-wise, I'm not sure, our lawmakers sitting there trying to figure out banning transgender military service members is the most efficient and effective way of time management
either. If there is a disruption with a group of troops and there's a problem there, address that problem. I don't know that you need sweeping policies like this. And I also don't know that we can appreciate or should appreciate the back and forth from administration to administration. How do you plan your life? When is something settled in this country? I'm concerned about that too. To go back to the budgeting a little bit, we always invite your thoughts and comments on either of the topics, 713-440-8870. Kenneth is on the line from South Park. Kenneth, what's on your mind?
I think it's about the comment about this city finally coming up with a balanced budget and they've been kicking this can down the road. One mayor's been inheriting this debt. You know, I like the approach to it, but I don't like where I'm at right now. My water bill is higher than my electric bill, you know. And then we just had Rodney Ellis on there. He was talking about how he did like a Robin Hood to do things with these streets. He did a real good job and with the streets and stuff like that. But, you know, it needs to be something put in place, man, to keep this from happening over and over, because as fast as one of these mayors coming in and fix it, another one comes in with tax and spend, you know, and they're killing us with these taxes, man, you know, and, you know, I don't talk about the problems ever, but something needs to come in place to stop this from happening over and over. This city is getting too big. They got too much of a infusion of people and just revenue coming into this city to keep on raising these taxes, man, you know?
Kenneth, let me ask you, though. I'm assuming, though, you appreciate whether they keep the promise or not, that it won't increase our taxes. That must feel like a good step in the right direction.
It ain't so much of a promise. It came up during, like, when Clinton was in office, about a balanced budget amendment. I know you can't do something like that on the city level, but they need to come up with something ironclad to keep this from not happening over and over again, to where we have some kind of insurance policy as citizens that we're not going to keep on ending up in this situation over and over. This city is just too rich for this, man, because we get somebody in the office, what do? They want to tax and spend, and stuff like that, man. They just lay a groundwork and stick to it. That's where I'm coming from.
Kenneth, last question before I let you go. I'm just curious, if you were given the keys to the city, where would you see an area that we should be looking at for cutting spending?
Well, they did it. Other than selling off some of this city property, they're not doing nothing with. They got places, man. They got city-owned buildings, property, and everything. You're not using. Sell it off, man. Put it in our general fund.
Kenneth,
hold on to it.
Kenneth, thank you. When you announce your candidacy for mayor, let us know. Give us a call. Thank you for calling in and sharing with you. We love to hear from all of you with your points of view and thoughts on the topics we're talking about. 713-440-8870. You know what today is?
What is today?
It's National School Nurse Day.
Oh, that's awesome.
I remember when we were kids. It was like you go to the school nurse and be like, I have a headache. And the joke used to be, what's she going to do? Put a Band-Aid on your head? It's like, no, she lets you sleep on that little cot over in the side with the little curtain that goes around.
Oh, my gosh. You know, I have to say, at my daughter's school, we've always had some incredible nurses. And I have a huge respect for them because they see all kinds of things. And I feel like they are the best lie detector testers. You know, they sit there and they say, well, my tummy hurts. And it's like, well, does it really?
They get a lot of experience with a lot of kids there. And
they
so
see right through it.
We appreciate our school nurses, and we know it's a hard job out there. And so thank you for doing that. Something else that I found quite fascinating in the news, a Wisconsin woman who disappeared nearly 63 years ago was found in another state, and she says she had no regrets about reinventing herself.
Zero regrets. Well, you know, as long as there wasn't this huge search for her.
63 years ago, I'm sure. All of a sudden, she disappeared.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Good for her. But also, I mean, I hope she told some people, right?
I doubt it.
Define disappeared, Ernie.
They thought she was gone. That's my definition.
Wow.
I do hope that it didn't have anything to do with leaving responsibilities financially behind or family responsibilities, things like that, that she thought it through and just decided it was time to start anew.
That's an odd situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, 713-440-8870. Have you ever thought about just disappearing and being gone?
Know.
Would you? How would you go about it? We'd love to know. 713-440-8870. But before we find out about that, Greg's on from Greenway. Greg, what's on your mind?
I just want to comment on this hysteria about the debt and the budget.
Okay.
At a government level, we have to have debt. At a government level, we have to spend.
Mm-hmm.
a huge part of the government budget, city budget, state budget, federal budget, is salaries, paying people to work. That's got to continue. When you have a growing population, you're going to have a growing employment base. You want that to happen. The federal government can produce all the money that it wants. We are not on a gold standard. We're not on a butter standard or a salt in the sea standard. We can create all the money we need based on the productivity and the innovation of the U.S. economy. So people who say we need a balanced budget are uninformed and don't understand what they're saying. At a personal level, you and I, yes, we have to manage our debt. We don't have a printing press. We don't have a treasury. We don't have the U.S. Mint. The federal government does. The money slides down to the states. The states then disperse the money to the cities. The city of Houston gets its money from the state as well as property taxes. Property taxes has to go up. So people need to adjust their thinking and adjust their paradigm. We are not on a gold standard. We are on a productivity and innovation standard. And thanks God we have a few people like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and others who generate money, who employ people, who create new industries. Because when I was born in 1962, there was no operating system. Today we have operating systems. We have Microsoft, we have Intel, we have Apple. Those things did not exist before. And because of them, the country has benefited. People have benefited. Wealth has been generated. So people need to adjust their thinking. We should not look at government spending as in the same way that we look at our personal household spending. They are different. They are completely different. And we do not want a balanced budget, because if we have a balanced budget, that means the government has removed money from the private sector. You always want a deficit because you want the government to spend the money out into the economy to the private sector.
Greg, I'm going to have to stop you right there so we can get a break, but I appreciate that point of view, and thank you for sharing it with us. And as always, we invite you to share your point of view, 713-440-8870. We'll continue to monitor it, and we'll come back to the calls as they come in. So share what you're thinking.
Coming up on Hello Houston, we talk with Peter Salib, Assistant Professor of Law at the University of Houston Law Center, about House Bill 1375, which aims to hold bookstores liable for damages arising from the distribution, transmission, or display of harmful material to a minor. And we'll continue to take your calls on today's topics at 713-440-8870. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7.
During the pandemic, we focused on protecting children when we may have been harming them.
School closures in much of our country continued on where children couldn't step foot into a classroom for more than a year, while all sorts of other parts of society were open. There was never any epidemiological reason to think that this would be effective at all.
Analyzing pandemic decisions. That's next time on Think.
You can hear Think coming up tonight. It's on at 10 o'clock on News 88.7.
Support comes from Houston Chamber Choir, presenting Gather Round, the final concert of founder and artistic director Robert Simpson's 30-year tenure. Saturday, May 31st at St. Luke's Methodist Church. Tickets at houstonchamberchoir.org/radio. Support comes from Chariot Energy, delivering a range of electricity options for Texas businesses, large and small, offering custom plans for large businesses and web portal access for the entrepreneurs. Details at chariotenergy.com.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from St. Luke's Health and the St. Luke's Foundation, supporting clinical excellence, compassionate care, and a healthier future for all. More at supportstlukes.org.
Support comes from GenPro, a Houston-based home generator service, providing power to homes during unexpected outages, helping with connectivity and productivity. More information is available at genpro.com.
Support comes from the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, presenting History Book Club, a discussion of Simon Winchester's book, Knowing What We Know, The Transmission of Knowledge, May 14th at Bayou Bend or via Zoom. More at mfah.org.
Support comes from Theater Under the Stars, presenting In the Heights, the first Broadway musical from Lin-Manuel Miranda, creator of Hamilton. Runs May 20th through June 1st at the Hobby Center. Tickets at tuts.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Fooled him again. Frank isn't here.
That's right.
Yeah, Frank is out today, but he'll be back with us. So if you're missing Frank, don't worry. He'll be back soon. We were talking about the city budget and the approach that they have to balancing it. And Kevin from the North Side is on the line. Kevin, what are you thinking about the budget?
Yeah, I do believe that it's good to have a balanced budget. That's what you look for. It shows accountability. It shows efficiency. But it just, when you start cutting, services, and you start cutting, employees inside of the city, the average citizen is not going to know every single employee that's going to be cut from each department. So you're not really going to know how inefficient those departments are going to be afterwards. Mm-hmm. But yet the taxpayer has to pay. I think that it would be very good to go take it back to the voters to remove the revenue cap so that the money can come in. I don't proclaim that I know exactly how the revenue cap works, but I know it's from what it sounds like, it's a cap on the revenue that the city can take in. So I would believe that it would be a good idea to take that back, and that would maybe help, because I think that it benefits more of the companies than it does the actual taxpayer. And I also believe that it would be a good idea to start taking some of the money back from the TERS that's being spent on TERS, start taking some of that money back from Metro that the city of Houston puts in, and start recouping some of that money, because I believe the taxpayers now are putting in more than they're getting back. Because when you look at it, and I know you'll cut me off here in a second, but the police departments are struggling, the fire departments are struggling, the trash pickup is struggling, the health department budget has been cut. So it's a lot of services that the citizens need that they're not actually getting, or they're getting it in small or inefficient amounts. And I believe that one of the ways is to take some of that money back from those entities that I mentioned, and to remove the revenue cap.
Kevin, thank you very much for that. Just a point, I do believe that the mayor's proposed budget says that there wouldn't be layoffs. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if he can hold to that or not, but that is what he is saying at this point. And we appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you for calling. Remember, we are interested in what you have to say, 713-440-8870, or you can email us, talk@hellohouston.org. Sarah's on the line with us, too. She wants to talk about one of my favorite stories, is the woman who went missing. Sarah from the Heights, what's on your mind?
Hi, y'all. Thanks so much for this show. You really become part of my daily habit. It's my new lunch habit.
Oh, thank you.
When I read that, when I read that story as a mother, I heard the part where she had 2 kids. And so I thought about the situation that she left them in, now knowing that she's alive again and doesn't want a relationship. And so my heart went out to those people, and I don't know where they are, but
Sarah, help me with this story a little bit more, because you know more than I do on it. When she left, did she leave? Who did she leave the children with? How did that happen? Do we know?
Well, so the story I read was that she left because of a possible domestic situation, and that she had 2 kids, and so I wonder what they went through throughout their life, knowing she was missing, but also being stuck in a place she thought was bad enough to leave.
Yeah, I'm surprised she didn't take the children with her. I think there's definitely an area for us to learn more about this story. Sarah, on a lighter note, would you ever just disappear? Have you ever thought about it?
I wish I could disappear with my family.
Uh-huh. That's the
and
right
also
way
have,
to do
a few $1 million with it. That would be nice.
Then you disappear.
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you very much for calling and sharing with us. And we'll dig deeper into this missing woman story and try and find out a little bit more about it. We appreciate your thoughts, as we do all of our listeners, 713-440-8870. Now moving on, a new bill, House Bill 1375, introduced in the Texas House, aims to hold bookstores liable for damages arising from the distribution, transmission, or display of harmful material material to a minor. Those who support the bill argue it's necessary to protect children from exposure to inappropriate material. Critics have argued that if passed, the bill could lead to bookstores being at risk for many potential lawsuits, as well as having to deal with the devastating financial penalties, including legal fees. To tell us more, we welcome Peter Salib, is an assistant professor of law at the University of Houston Law Center. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, I guess where I would want to start with this is this something we have to be concerned with?
Well, it's not a law yet, so as of today, there's no legal liability.
If it becomes a law, is this something we should be concerned with?
So I do think that there are things to worry about. To be clear, there are already laws on the books that impose criminal penalties if, for example, a bookstore sells adult, say, magazines to minors under certain conditions. You know, they have to know they're doing it. They have to know they're adult magazines. So we already do live in a world where there is this kind of restriction on selling this stuff to kids. Sorry, and I have a bit of a cold. I apologize for my voice. But I do think that this civil expansion of liability could be a big deal, both in terms of the amount of liability it threatens for, say, people who sell books, and also the provisions of the law, which are in some ways quite unusual.
Well, I was going to ask about the provisions of the law. So who gets to decide what readily accessible is and harmful material? Because like you said, we already have certain laws that go around those type things. We have age limits about buying certain material. So exactly how is this going to affect when we're looking at that definition?
Yeah, so this idea of harmful material actually comes from a line of Supreme Court cases, First Amendment cases, that say, in fact, the state does have an interest in keeping certain stores from selling certain kinds of things to minors, and there is a legal definition which this act does incorporate by reference, and it's a pretty high standard actually. So for something to count as harmful material, I don't have the language memorized, but you have to show things like judged by contemporary community standards. It appeals to the prurient interest, so kind of a illicit interest, and that it has essentially no social or artistic value. So that's actually a pretty high bar to clear. And in a case where a particular book or magazine was sold, a judge, for example, would have, as an initial matter, the responsibility of deciding whether this is plausibly the kind of thing that qualifies for that definition, that high standard.
Now, are we looking at, when we're talking about bookstores, but whenever you say a magazine or things like that, I immediately go to, how is this going to affect small business owners, mom and pop shops? But we're also looking at perhaps convenience stores. And so talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the proposed law doesn't differentiate, right? It just says any business and any person who owns one of these businesses. Is actually one of the strange things about the law. It imposes liability not just on the person who does the stuff, maybe not just on the business who employs the person who does this stuff, but potentially on any shareholder in that business, which is quite broad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Here we go. We're going into my old New World Problems, Old World Solutions. This sounds like a great law for 1972. My problem is there is a thing called the internet. I cannot imagine that anything you can find in a bookstore published in this country, you cannot find something similar online. The cow's out of the barn, as I like to often say here. Isn't this kind of just an exercise where the real problems lie in there is this material available everywhere now? You're putting out a little fire here while the building's burning next door.
Yeah, so there's an extent to which you might say this is just a dumb law because it won't solve any real problems. What it'll do is it'll make some Texas small businesses have to pay out large amounts of damages without really protecting any kids because everybody's got internet access and a smartphone, and to the extent that you want your kids not to access stuff on the internet, well, you have a different set of problems to manage. Right. And I'm pretty sympathetic to that view. I think that would be a good reason for lawmakers, for the rest of the House, the rest of the Senate, to vote against the bill. it's not exactly a, say, constitutional problem, right? So if states want to enact laws that are not going to be very effective, in many cases they can. Not all. There are actually kind of questions about whether in say the First Amendment context, whether the law will actually accomplish what the government says. But I don't expect those to be the reasons that this law doesn't go into effect. I think it's...
Who's determining, though, what is harmful material? Is it up to each seller? Is it up to those that receive the material? Is it up to those who see minors that have the material to decide it? I go back to my belief, and I'll know pornography when I see it. It really doesn't help define what's going on here.
Yeah, so the definition is this one I sort of referred to before, where you have to show that it's like utterly without social or artistic redeeming quality. And the question of who decides, well, in the first instance, this is a civil suit. So, this is a civil law. It allows the bringing of civil suits, which means that in the first instance, it'll be like the parent of the child who is sold the thing, for example.
So you won't know you're doing the crime until the crime has happened and you have been found guilty of it.
Well, so, you can always make a prediction about what's going to happen. And all civil suits to some extent work this way, right? Like anyone can sue you. Sometimes they have a really bad claim and you predictably know you're going to win, right? The main parties who will be deciding this stuff, I think, will be the judges hearing these cases. Someone will sue and say, this book, it qualifies under this harmful material standard, and the judge will have to go look at the book, and there'll be a motion to dismiss, and the judge will decide whether as a legal matter, this book that was sold qualifies.
Judge A could decide one way, Judge B another way. Homeowner, mom and pops, as Celeste was talking about, they don't know.
Well, so what I find very interesting is that this bill actually carves out and takes away traditional media from this policy. So to me, that is a little bit odd because now you really are you're alienating to a certain extent bookstores. I mean, you're taking it to magazines and books only because it takes out TV. Why would they do that in traditional forms of media?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure what to make of the carve-outs. There's a carve-out for some traditional media. There is a carve-out for internet providers, right? So if you're say Comcast or something, or a Google, and you link to a site that then does this, you're carved out. I don't totally know why some things and not others.
Because to me, that would be the most obvious to be drilling down on making sure that readily accessible harmful material is coming. It's not accessible.
So yeah, it's either got to be an all or nothing. But I'm just kind of baffled about these kind of laws because I don't know. I'm Tony, and I own this convenience store, this bookstore. I've had it for years, and I sell this book because I've always sold this book. And now all of a sudden this book was deemed by one judge somewhere that now it is harmful. I don't know how I build a business this way, not knowing what could potentially be called. And then it leads into censorship in what maybe I'm going to allow my store to sell. And so I'm cutting off ideas out of fear. I'm concerned about all of that.
Yeah, I will say, so to some extent, if you're in the convenience store business and you're selling magazines or whatever, you're already thinking about this because there are these criminal prohibitions on the books that cover the same stuff. The harmful materials is defined, as we talked about before. So you should be, a little bit cognizant of this already. I will say, though, that one thing about criminal law is there's discretion in the prosecutor's office to figure out who ought to who the government's resources ought to be directed to prosecuting. And in most cases, minor stuff is not going to get prosecuted. We save those resources for the really, really serious violators. This is a civil statute, this proposed statute, which would just allow anybody who was sufficiently mad about whatever magazine their kids brought home to bring a lawsuit. And I do think that changes the calculus quite a lot for business owners in terms of the risk that they face for accidentally putting something on the shelf.
Would this bill in any way, shape, or form be just a complete violation of the First Amendment?
So I think it's complicated. Again, so these other prohibitions, the ones that are on the books for criminal offenses for selling these kinds of materials to minors, those have generally been upheld as constitutional. I do think that things might change in this context where we have a civil suit, because there's this risk of many different people suing that has more of a chilling effect. And also the specific way in which this law is drafted is almost designed to chill, right? So it has this provision where if someone sues you and they win, you have to pay their lawyer's fees, but not the other way around, right? So if someone sues you and you win, they don't cover your lawyer's fees. It's totally one-sided in this way. That seems almost designed to chill speech. I don't think that a court thinking about First Amendment principles would look kindly on a provision like that. And you know, the shareholder liability thing for people who simply own the business, and yes, you have to direct the business to do something that then benefits you, but it's quite a capacious provision. So all these things together, I think, will present a different First Amendment case than those criminal prohibitions that have generally been upheld. Yeah.
Peter Salib is an assistant professor of law at the University of Houston Law Center. Peter, thank you so much for joining Ernie and I today on Hello Houston.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Coming up, we'll discuss the state of personal finance for Houston area residents with Dan Potter, the director of the Houston Population Research Center at Rice University's Kinder Institute for Urban Research. Stay with us.
Your right to know what's really going on in our world depends on more than just great journalism. It depends on your participation.
Houston Public Media is funded by Houstonians for Houstonians. 80% of our budget comes directly from you, our community.
That's how trusted information stays free and accessible. No ads, no shareholders, just clear and careful reporting.
Protect your right to stay informed by visiting houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
I'm Matt Hara, morning anchor here at Houston Public Media. HPM is the most reliable news station in Houston because we don't answer to anybody other than our audience. Our story selection process is rigorous, our editing process is rigorous, and we buy hard into the fact that one of our primary jobs here is to hold elected officials accountable. If I may say so, I think we have one of the best political reporters in the state in Andrew Schneider, and it's people like him, we have great people here that make our station go.
I'm Jeremy Hobson. Next time on The Middle, it's been 35 years since President George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act into law.
America welcomes into the mainstream of life all of our fellow citizens with disabilities.
That law prohibited discrimination and required reasonable accommodations in public buildings and transportation. But today, with over 70 million Americans living with a disability, what improvements still need to be made? That's next time on The Middle.
You can hear that coming up tomorrow night at 8 p.m.
Support comes from DePelchin Children's Center. May is National Foster Care Awareness Month, and DePelchin is celebrating the foster parents who ensure that Houston area children are part of safe and loving families. Learn more at depelchin.org.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Live Nation, presenting Hauser, the Rebel is Back Tour, live in concert at Smart Financial Center at Sugar Land, Tuesday, May 20th. Tickets available at smartfinancialcenter.net.
And now back to Hello Houston. Join the conversation. Call now, 713-440-8870, or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
According to a new survey published by Rice University's Kinder Institute for Urban Research, 1 in 6 Harris County residents don't have a checking or savings account. And in 8 neighborhoods in the Houston area, more than 25% of residents lack a savings or checking account. Houston area residents aren't too confident in their financial knowledge either, according to this survey. But why? And what other trends did the survey uncover? To discuss the state of personal finance here in Harris County, Dan Potter is the director of the Houston Population Research Center at the Kinder Institute for Urban Research at Rice University. Dan, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Dan, when did you get your first savings or checking account?
Oh, see, now that would be one of those things that the parents set up, right? Is that you're 10, 11, 12 years old and grandma or grandpa might have cut you a check for Christmas.
Birthday money.
Birthday money that comes in. And so off you go to the local bank and they're starting that, at that point it was been a savings account.
Right.
but it just develops that literacy, that
And
fluency.
that's how I got my first one. I think I was probably like 5 or 6 years old, and it was just to show me this is happening.
Yep.
So I guess that's not what's happening anymore, huh?
For a lot of our residents, no, that you don't have that sort of built history, that normalization of money comes in and where does it go? It goes into the bank, but rather it's going into a jar on top of the refrigerator. It's going into our wallet, or for many of our residents, it's going right back out, paying those bills, groceries, utilities.
But Dan, this isn't something necessarily that's new. It's been happening for a very long time here in Houston and Harris County. We know that people are a little bit leery of banks. Why do you think that is? And is it a cultural thing? Talk to me about that.
I mean, so unfortunately, it's based entirely off of founded history that, there have been exploitative practices that banks have used to target particular areas, to target particular groups of people. I mean, you can think about even more recently, such as the subprime mortgage crisis that was very specifically, I shouldn't say very specifically, but disproportionately targeting individuals, people of color, Black and brown communities. And so, this isn't one of those like a century ago there was this thing. I mean, we're talking about in recent history, memory history, kind of like these are the experiences people had. And so when you start to talk to individuals about, are you going to put that at the bank, or you're going to open a CD, or you're going to take a retirement account, they're going, why would I trust those people? They took my neighbor's home away from them. Yesterday is what it's going to feel like to a lot of people.
I have a savings, I have a checking, but I would consider myself financially ignorant. I don't know what to do with my money. Thank God no one gave me much.
I can help you with that, Ernie.
Yeah, Celeste will know where my money should go. But I'm curious, you looked at this area, but how does it look? And I don't know if you have these numbers. I assume you do. Nationwide, are we the norm, or are we unique in this area?
So the FDIC does an annual survey where they actually look to test people's financial knowledge. And we as a country are typically very average in our financial knowledge. And so here in the Houston area, while we did not directly assess people's financial knowledge, we asked them sort of a self-report. How do you think your knowledge is? Now, you could straight up lie and say, hey, my knowledge is fantastic. I have this and that and the other thing, and maybe you don't know what you're talking about. But actually, our average score was a 5 on a scale of 0 to 10. And so self-assessment aside, even from just like a self-reflecting moment, we're going, I am at best average. And that does align with some of those more national.
So this is a bigger problem than just
This is a much bigger problem than that.
Why is it important? And I know you've kind of addressed it, but just to put it in focus, why is it important to have these things? And now in today's day and age, there are different things to do with money. There's different monies now, bringing those cryptos. Why is it important that we still have a traditional savings and or checking account?
These are going to be the things that open up to us big item purchases. Big item purchases, thinking about a new car, thinking about a home, and particularly in that home space, that is where you start to accumulate wealth that's not just about you right now, but becomes that intergenerational building of wealth. I've got a home, and so I'm gonna pay it off. I'm gonna have that as a sort of resource there, and then I'm gonna hand that down if it gets sold to children or grandchildren. And if I'm not able to actually buy that home, I'm not setting in motion that intergenerational wealth building. And in fact, that inability to buy a home is what's further building and separating out the haves from the have-nots when it comes to wealth.
And so where are people going for financial advice for their personal finances? Where are Houstonians going for that?
Yes, please. I need that number.
You're not going to like this. It's friends and family.
They're worse than me.
I can't speak to your friends or family, and I'm not no swipes at my own. But that is their primary source. That we asked, we said, hey, who is your primary source if you're trying to make a decision about money, purchases? It's family and friends. In fact, financial professionals was number 3 on the list behind websites.
Really?
Well, the thing is I think there's often a stigma around financial professionals. One, it can be expensive. And 2, I'm barely making it here. Why am I going to trust another person that I don't know with my money?
Well, and I think that's really getting at this idea of like our community and the financial well-being of us is something that's just not shared, evenly across. And so while we might think about these things, we're like, if you're not well, if you're feeling sick, we have doctors, we have clinics, we have people we go to help us feel better physically, mentally even, right? But we don't think about our finances in that same sort of vein. And so we don't think about like, oh, my finances, I'm struggling with this. I should probably get a professional involved, right? But rather it becomes a luxury item that for too many people is exactly as you're pointing to. Why am I going to spend my money for this dude or for this guy, this professional?
Yeah.
Well, in my case, so I have an abnormally large amount of money in my savings account.
Okay.
And nothing else. Because I don't know what to do with the money. So my bank, they call quite regularly to say, hey, we'd like to help you know. But every time they call, it's somebody else. And they have so I don't believe, for me, and I know this is just my own fear and it isn't the reality situation, but what it says to me is this person's only going to be here for a moment. Who's really going to watch who's really going to guide me? This person is just at the desk right now. So I don't know where to go. And I sit there just sitting there. I mean, that's my financial. Help me.
Well, and I think that's where it's a lot of people think to themselves, how do I make my money work for me as opposed to just constantly working for my money kind of a situation. But it is that thing of, especially right now where you see markets are so volatile. And so there becomes that question of, do I put it there? And if you have the opportunity for that long-term investment strategy, if I'm just going to set it and forget it, perhaps that's a route that folks could be considering. But this is just one of those spaces where who am I supposed to talk to? What are the mechanisms that we as a community, as a society are building for people to be able to learn these things? And I think previously you might have thought, oh, well, schools are teaching financial knowledge, aren't they? Ask a kid to fill a checkout these days.
Right. And I want to touch a little bit on the word disparity because you did mention that and that growth that is happening. In 8 of 30 neighborhood areas that you surveyed, more than 25% of the residents are unbanked. 1, define unbanked, and 2, talk to me about those neighborhoods that you identified.
Yeah, so by unbanked, we are very much focusing on a checking account and a savings account. That do you have either of those? If you do, great. You are banked.
Which feels very basic.
Incredibly basic.
Does that include online banks? Are they the same as traditional banks in this regard?
We are focused on a traditional checking account or traditional savings account. So if you have, say, a high yield savings account, that was not taken into consideration there. If you happen to have cryptocurrency, which we were bringing up earlier, we're not really looking at that per se. But we did look at a variety of different things. Again, retirement accounts, individual investment accounts, so like stock portfolio kind of things, the checking, the traditional saving, the cryptocurrency, and even ticking through all of those different things, 9% of Houston area residents said, I don't have any of that going on right now. So you're talking like 1 in 10, 1 in 11 folks.
So then where are they putting their money?
Great question. And in fact, that was what spurred this entire survey was what are we doing as a community with our funds? And there's a lot of stories out there where you can talk with community organizations that are working, hand in hand with individuals to build better financial well-being. And the stories that are coming from those are they have a jar on their refrigerator. They've got an envelope in the drawer.
Last question before we let you go. I'm curious if everyone did step up and were putting their money where it should go, into banks and savings accounts. As a community, how does it benefit us?
It benefits us by creating that opportunity for our money to be making money for us and not just
But not
us always working
individually.
on it.
Does it have a benefit to our community as a whole?
It would also potentially bring banks, credit unions into communities that do not currently have them. And that the end result of that is those banks begin making investments back into the communities where they are located so that you kind of have this economic churn and this engine set off so that you can potentially be building out resources within a community through this banking process that you just don't really have right now with communities where they don't have that brick and mortar bank built, anchored, rooted in the community.
Dan Potter is the director of the Houston Population Research Center at Kinder Institute for Urban Research at Rice University. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Coming up on Hello Houston, a look at this year's Galveston home tours. Stay with us for the second hour of Hello Houston.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from St. Luke's Health and the St. Luke's Foundation, supporting clinical excellence, compassionate care, and a healthier future for all. More at supportstlukes.org.
For the rest of the day, we're looking for a slight chance of showers. Otherwise, we'll see some sunshine later. Currently, we have a few clouds and 77. This is your NPR station, KUHF, Houston. News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, we continue diving into the top stories of the day, such as State Rep Cheryl Cole trying again this year to pass a bill that guarantees a tenant's right to air conditioning. I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
And I'm Ernie Manous. We'll also talk with Craig Considine, author and scholar of religion and interfaith dialogue at Rice University, about the Conclave and the search for the new pope.
Plus, Wright, Chief Creator Officer of Galveston Historical Foundation, tells us about this year's annual Galveston Historical Homes Tour.
And we also want to hear from you. Give us a call, 713-440-8870, or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Just go to hellohouston.org and click that orange banner.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. India is defending its strikes on parts of Pakistan and Pakistani-controlled territory early Wednesday. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri has more on India's actions, marking the most dramatic escalation in tensions the nuclear-armed neighbors have faced in years.
These actions were measured, non-escalatory, proportionate, and responsible. They focused on dismantling the terrorist infrastructure and disabling terrorists likely to be sent across to India.
India accuses the Pakistani government of being complicit in militant attacks, including deadly violence against tourists in Indian administered Kashmir last month. But Pakistan's Minister of Information, Atullah Tarar, argues Pakistan itself has repeatedly been the target of terrorist attacks.
We've been saying that the Pahalgam incident deserves an investigation, a fair and impartial investigation. India ran away from the investigation, and now they've run away after attacking civilian population in Pakistan. But we've responded back and we've shot down some planes. We stand against terrorists. We stand against terrorism. We've given 90,000 lives in the war against terrorism. And we played our part to make the world a safer place.
The top Pakistani and Indian officials were heard on the BBC. Houthi rebels in Yemen say they will keep striking targets in Israel. That is despite a deal announced by President Trump ending the weeks-long strikes between U.S. forces and the Iranian-backed militants. More from NPR's Carrie Kahn.
Houthi spokesman Mohammed Abdul Salam says the U.S. deal does not include Israel. In a social media post, Abdul says Israel targets will continue to be hit in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. A missile fired from Yemen landed near Tel Aviv's airport Sunday. Israel quickly retaliated. Trump's announcement of a deal mediated by Oman to end hostilities took Israelis by surprise. That's according to an official with knowledge of the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity. Another comment by Trump Tuesday that only 21 hostages in Gaza are still alive drew condemnation from relatives of those held there. Officially, Israel says 24 are living. The hostage families are demanding Israeli officials release any new information. Carrie Kahn, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
WYPR's Scott Maucione reports a federal appeals court will soon decide whether it was legal to fire roughly 24,000 federal probationary employees without notifying states.
A panel of 3 judges listened to arguments from 19 states about how they believe they were harmed by the White House's mass layoffs. The states are seeking the reinstatement of the employees. They say without proper notification, they had to rush to provide benefits like unemployment insurance. The White House says it did not initiate an official reduction in force and therefore did not need to notify the states beforehand.
That's Scott Maucione reporting. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. Houston lawmakers will now begin a long process of deliberating over the city budget proposal set forth by Mayor John Whitmire's administration. Council members will hold town halls and public hearings on the proposal set to slash over $75 million in spending. Brandon Rottenhouse is a political science professor at the University of Houston. He praised Whitmire on this morning's Houston Matters.
This is definitely a thumbs up. He's able to put together a pretty solid-looking budget without raising taxes. That would have certainly been a red flag. He's able to give raises to firefighters and to police officers, as he indicated. He's able to trim the budget a bit.
Having said that, the city's controller, Chris Hollins, told us in a statement that he was not involved in the process, despite calling out warning signs on the city budget deficit. And President Trump's new tariffs are impacting the floral industry. Abraham Hakikian, the vice president of Plants and Petals, says that he's seeing an increase not only in the price of flowers, but also in the goods needed to transport and hold them.
Everything that goes around the flowers is more expensive. Foam, the glass vases, the wrapping paper, the foam that we make the flowers in, all of that is import from China. And that is the big deal.
He says the increase in prices may lead to decline in demand. The deadline to protest your property taxes is approaching. The Harris County Appraisal District says property owners have until May 15th or May 3rd or 30 days until after the date of the value notice to protest appraisal values. That can be done at hcad.org. It's 75 degrees, low of 69 tonight. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. And from the Doris Duke Foundation.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Frank Billingsley is not with us today. He's out learning more about the weather and our emergency response in the Houston and Harris County area. So as the season progresses, we'll be able to give you the most update and positive and accurate information we can. Always learning here at Hello Houston. So he'll be back with us in a couple of days. But in the meantime, join us on YouTube. You can find us on the Houston Public Media channel, or it's easier. Just go to hellohouston.org. Click the orange bar, and there we are in all our beauty.
I do want to say we were just talking about the finances of Houston area residents, and we did get a comment on YouTube for you specifically, Ernie.
Oh, for me.
That says, from Fritz Goldman says, Ernie, at least put it in a money market fund. So
if you're wondering what she's talking about, I did let out that I tend to have an abnormally large amount of money in my savings account and nowhere else. So it is at least in a bank. I give myself credit for that money mark. Okay, Fritz, you got to give me some advice. Help me figure out where to go with it, or anyone. I don't know what to do. Again, I know a lot about a lot of things and very little about even more. And Susie Orman, who I've worked with for years, would kill me for saying this. I know even less about my money.
Well, I can help you spend it, Ernie.
I know you can.
I'm
help
here
your
for you,
husband
Ernie.
Spend his too.
I am
you
absolutely
spend yours. I want to let you know if you've got ideas, thoughts, questions, suggestions for us. Lots of ways to reach out to us. You can email us talk@hellohouston.org. You can text or call us at 713-440-8870. I made it sound like we had a lot of ways. Those are them. You're there. You can chat on the YouTube channel with us. But like you said, we've had response from what's been going on in the first hour of the show. We were talking about the new proposed budget by the mayor for the city of Houston, and folks have reacted.
That's right. And we have Wayne on the line who is going to give us his comment. Hi, Wayne. How are you today?
I laugh because, Wayne, I had said I was going to take your call, and then I just stopped talking. So, Wayne, tell us what's on your mind.
Well, what's on my mind, I was looking at a hearing with Scott Benson, and they asked him a simple question about who pays the tariffs. It wouldn't even answer that. The American people, the consumer, pay the tariffs. I'm a truck driver here in Houston. I go to the ports to pick up the goods. We're starting to get no goods because China's sending empty containers.
Mm-hmm.
So what's transpiring in a couple more weeks? Some shelves gonna be empty. Our president gonna be playing golf, saying we're supposed to take a little hit, and it's gonna be painful when it shouldn't be painful. And then I just found out that Scott Benson is a hedge fund. So when they be playing with the tariffs and the stock go up, some of the people that's in his cabinet wins money. While we lose as a taxpayer, we lose, but we gonna get hit with the tariffs. And people be thinking tariffs when Trump say, we gonna be rich. You already rich, but the consumers and the taxpayer are going to be poor.
Wayne, thank you for that and the unique insight of being a truck driver who goes down to the port and is seeing firsthand the lightening of content that is coming into this country, the products that are coming in. And we were talking yesterday about this very topic on the show, and what they were saying was, maybe 6 to 8 weeks before we'll actually really feel it, because there is that lag effect. A lot of stuff has been warehoused. So it's going to be interesting. We'll see what's happening. Thank you very much for calling, Wayne. We always take your calls too, 713-440-8870. I was setting you up for something else a minute ago, because I had forgotten Wayne was on the line.
Wayne was on the line.
But Wayne was with us. But now let's go back to the budget.
Yes, and so we have been receiving quite a few YouTube comments about the budget, as well as a few other comments. And we did get a text that says, I like our mayor. He's a Democrat I could vote for. Oh, wait, I did. Usually you get spending cuts, alarm police, firemen. No, just budget. So that was a text that we did receive. Michael from the Energy Corridor, also about the city budget, says, I think saying you want government deficits is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. What's the plan to pay off the debt?
And that was in regards to a caller we had that said you want to run a deficit because that means the money's going out. And I think that there is the ability to run a slight deficit. What we see happening in government all the time is that deficit grows and grows and grows and grows. And there is value in lack of money, and we've got to pay attention to that. So thank you, Michael, for that.
And one of the other topics that we were talking about was the new ban against trans military servicemen. We did get a message on YouTube about this that says this shouldn't be an issue if the percent was 0.02 or 60%. Why not thank that person for wanting to serve our country? God bless them all.
Great point there.
That is a great point. And then going back, we were also talking about a new bill that potentially could be affecting small business owners of bookstores, and that was Bill 1375. Somebody sent us a text that says, I have a suggestion. Could they put a parental advisory sticker on books as they do on music that has profanity? That way it would be left to the consumer and removes the liability to the bookstore and the book distributor.
I guess that goes back to my earlier question, though, is who is deciding which content is ones that would need the labeling? And as we know from the music industry, that had a very rocky history and never really materialized in a way it became a censorship of music in a lot of ways. I think I go back to what I always say, it has to start with education and educating our younger people into it. Now, of course, there are things that should not be in the hands of minors, and I'm not saying that, but I'm saying in the stuff that's going to fall between the lines, the things that aren't as clear, we need to teach our children how to evaluate information they see. That's
an interesting point, Ernie. Do you really think that when there was advisory labels put on CDs that it really did change and censor music?
You know what it did? It told us what to buy. It did not deter. It may have stopped it from the register, you being able to purchase it. This is how far back we're going. You bought it at a register.
You bought it at Target. I remember.
The sticker on it.
There was a sticker on it.
And you wanted the one that had the sticker on, even if they had a censored version of it or a re-edited version. You went for the full version.
A quick story about a censored CD. So growing up, my parents were very strict about CDs and that type of stuff and music that we played. We were always, they were always honest about that. And my brother had a Limp Bizkit CD that had a pretty, I think they were, a hand signal. And my dad, it was not his, it was his friend's. And my dad took it out of his little Honda Civic and saw it and snapped it in half. And my brother was like, that's not even mine. And yeah, I think that's...
And that's where I think the censorship should happen. In the home, your father snapping your CD, cutting off your internet access. I'm all fine with that. Raise your children as you want.
Yes.
But teach them to learn. Yes. I have a record store story I'll tell you another time. So you all have to hang on for that.
That's right. And we want to hear what your thoughts are. Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Do we want to go to headlines or do we want to read some more texts?
Well, we got quite a few about the House Bill 1375. Yeah. I'll read a few more. Bill from Rosenberg said, if the law is passed, it needs to scrutinize who is determining what is considered harmful.
Thank you, Bill.
It doesn't make sense to ban these books because children are being exposed to these harmful things in public in Texas. Yeah.
I like that comment. And you also got another text, I think, down here.
That's right. This civil bill regarding harmful materials is designed to control people through the fear of other people. It's no different than Texas civil abortion law. It means to divide people and control the masses.
And that's kind of what you were saying.
Yeah.
And so we appreciate that. Remember, if you have any comments, thoughts on the topics we've been talking about, it's easy to share them with us. You can email us your thoughts at talk@hellohouston.org or by texting or calling 713-440-8870 or over on YouTube. Just join in the chat there. We're monitoring that as well.
So moving into our topics for this hour, State Representative Cheryl Cole is a Democrat from Austin, and she's trying again this year to pass a bill that guarantees a tenant's right to air conditioning. The bill would require landlords to provide cooling systems and offer accommodations when repairs take more than 5 days. The proposal, which is the same as one Cole filed 2 years ago, faces a tough road because of hesitancy in the GOP-led House and Senate to put more responsibility on landlords and more regulations on the books. The issue is becoming more pressing. In Harris County, 80 deaths were linked to heat-related complications from 2019 to 2023, and that is according to a Harris County Public Health report. What are your thoughts on this air conditioning requirement? Landlords, if you're listening to this, give us a call, 713-440-8870.
I am surprised my reaction to this.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't have thought this would be where I would go. Yes, of course, I think everyone should be able to be comfortable. And I think air conditioning, especially in the region we live in, is a necessity. My problem with the law, and this surprises me that I think this,
I'm waiting for
is that for some people, they can barely afford the rent they're paying to have a place to be safe. And so if there is this requirement, I believe then landlords would increase the rental price, and therefore it may phase more people out of the ability to get a home or a place to call home. Mm-hmm. That's what bothers me about it. I think that, yes, people should have access to that, but I worry of the economics of it. Now, the argument could be, but the heat is so extreme if you don't have that. So it's hard to say. I don't like putting a law on that is mandatory that then the price could go up and those that can barely, because there are a lot of people in our community, a lot of people listening now who can just make ends meet. If it becomes mandatory to have the AC in these homes, the landlord is passing it on to the tenants. That's just my outside concern.
One, my honest first thought was, okay, this is an actual law and a bill that is affecting people in a very, very direct way. And I personally think that this absolutely should be passed, in the point that, one, there can be a stipulation in there that says you will not be incurring any extra cost. And I do think that we need the fact that we live in Houston, Texas, and that isn't a regulation, to me is where are the rights of renters in this? And I think that I can't believe people would leave, landlords would leave people out in the heat like that for more than 5 days. That's crazy.
Now, see, when it comes to the repair and all of that, you have already rented a place that has a service. You should be given that service. And if your AC goes out, the mandatory immediate repair, all that. I'm all with that part of it. I just get worried on the part where it becomes mandatory that every dwelling has to have that. If that then incurs, like you're saying, if it incurs more cost, but that's what's going to happen,
Yeah.
And so it's uncomfortable because, in the city, it says we have cooling centers, but they're not open all the time, and you can't live that way. We need to adjust for the area, better ventilation in the buildings we build, better attempts for at least all the new ones that come online. But those are often not the place where people in low-income situations are renting. They're not moving into the new places.
And that's my thing is when we're looking at low-income renters, what rights do they have? And where do they go to hold people accountable when they are in bad conditions, when they're living in areas that are bad conditions? Again, that should fall on the landlord. That should be just basic civility and I think rights to make sure that we don't have, because you're thinking about these things. What about if they're elderly? What if they're pregnant? Or what if it's a woman who has young children and they're in a home? That's dangerous.
Right.
That should absolutely be taken care of.
And maybe if there's a policy where the city provides, or the county or the state provides low-cost AC units, and that if a landlord is installing them, that does not incur an increase in the price of rental, and they can get them. If there's some kind of bargaining there, I just don't want to see the cost put on to people who are already burdened. But those people do deserve AC.
Absolutely.
It's a wicked thicket, whatever that expression is. We're curious what you think about this topic and everything else we're chatting about. 713-440-8870. Let us know your air conditioning stories. But let's go to the phone right now with Roberto from the Museum District, who's got a couple quick comments for us. Roberto, what's on your mind?
Very quick. I have the solution for transsexual.
Okay.
For example, transsexual athletes have a separate class, and they will compete with each other. So straights don't have to worry about, he got male hormones, he's competing with females. Have a separate class. Eventually, everyone will get used to that and will integrate. And also military, you say it's very small percentage. We'll put them all together, 432 of them, form a company, and they're all one unit. And again, people get used to it. I'm a retired teacher. I can tell you, people are born this way. They don't choose to be transsexual. Like they don't choose to be gay. No, who would want to be gay? Who would want to be transsexual? With all the misery, created, I would tell my students on current events when this would come up, I say, now imagine this. You're a parent, and your child has come to you and said that they're gay or lesbian. What are you going to do? The hardest job in the world is being a parent. So we can't be judging parents who are real strict or whatever. It's just something we're not used to dealing with. And the second thing, real quick, the budget. You never have a deficit. It will affect your credit rating, and you're going to pay higher interest rates, and you get a bad reputation. That's it.
Roberto, thank you for your comments and your thoughts. We're interested in other folks' thoughts and comments as well. 713-440-8870.
There was a lot there. I do want to clarify that it's 4,420, not 420.
And also, I get worried when we talk about the whole idea of separate but equal kind of legislation. But we do appreciate your thoughts, and we're curious what other people think. We were talking about AC, and I'm curious our listeners' reaction to that. 713-440-8870. Barbara happens to be on the line right now with us. Barbara, your thoughts on the AC issue?
Hi. Well, I agree that everybody needs AC in the Houston area. But I'm also wondering, if you're renting, say, a house and you have air conditioning units on that house, it's one thing to say you have units that work. It's a whole other thing to pay for the cost of running those units, which a lot of people who own their homes decide not to use the units a lot of the time because they can't afford it.
Good point.
And I don't know how it works. If I moved into an apartment and the apartments were all air conditioned, and that was a part of the entire rental. However much I used, that's one thing. But, a rental that just has units or even central, if you have to pay your utilities, you're still priced out of it if you're on a limited income.
Yeah. Barbara, really quickly, your thoughts. So in considering where we live and the temperatures and people that are maybe challenged to pay rent, what kind of solution would you have? What do you think could work?
Well, if I were God, I'm pretty sure I could give you a solution, but I'm not. And it's a solution that says if people really do need AC in this area, but I do know that there are a great many people who are trying to suffer through things with electric fans and, small units that they may run for a few hours in the worst part of the day or at night, So maybe it should be tied, maybe there should be something with the utilities company tied to use of electricity in the summer, maybe a forgiveness if the families can apply for and demonstrate that they have elderly or sickly or young children in the home. Maybe there's a compassionate use that the utility company would provide.
That's a great
for.
idea, Barbara. Thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for listening. So remember, we're interested in your calls, comments, thoughts on the stories we're dealing with today. Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll talk with author and scholar of religion and interfaith dialogue at Rice University, Craig Considine, on the search for the new pope. And we continue to take your calls on today's topics at 713-440-8870. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7.
When you hear a story on Houston Public Media, you know it's been carefully reviewed and put together by journalists who take the time to get it right.
Your support helps keep our reporting clear, balanced, and factual.
Because when you have all the facts, you can make better decisions for yourself, your family, and your future.
Protect the news that you rely on. Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
I think Buffett ultimately made the world a little smarter about how the system really works. And I think by the public understanding how the system really works, you like to think that improves the system because there are fewer people to cheat.
I'm Michael Barbaro. That's Today on the Daily from the New York Times.
You can hear The Daily. It's coming up tonight at 7 o'clock.
Support comes from LaPorte CPAs and Business Advisors, an independent accounting and business advisory firm serving clients for more than 75 years. With 190 employees across offices in Houston, New Orleans, and other locations. More information at laporte.com. Support comes from Houston Public Works, with a reminder that only flushing the 3 Ps, pee, poo, and toilet paper, can help prevent blockages and sewer overflows. More at protectourpipes.org. Support comes from Broadway Bank's commercial banking team. Since 1941, committed to helping businesses with their financial needs and growth. More information available at broadway.bank/commercial. Member FDIC. Support comes from the Houston Symphony, performing Ravel's Bolero. Plus, Venezuelan trumpet virtuoso Paco Flores performs 2 concertos written especially for him. May 9th through 11th at Jones Hall. Tickets at houstonsymphony.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
The papal conclave to replace Pope Francis has begun in Rome. The highly selective process happens behind the closed doors of the Sistine Chapel. But what does this process involve, and who are the early favorites for the next pope? To discuss, we welcome Craig Considine, who is an author and scholar of religion and interfaith dialogue at Rice University. Craig, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
You know, considering your area of expertise, this is your busy season, and it doesn't happen often, huh?
This is very true. Last time in 2013, I was in Dublin, but I was in the middle of my PhD, so I had no time. And now being at Rice, it's been a pretty hectic 2 weeks, and I suspect it'll be a pretty hectic week ahead here.
So, Craig, why don't we start with what is happening right now? Bring us into the fold of things.
Well, did you watch the ceremony this morning? They took the oath. Each cardinal has just taken their oath. The doors of the Sistine Chapel have been shut with and locked with a key. That's actually what conclaves means. It's a Latin term for with the key. So once those doors are shut, there's not a lot that we know outside of the fact that the voting starts. So very likely for there to be a vote this evening. And as I was mentioning on Fox 26 this morning, this voting system is old school. It's paper ballot. So each cardinal is sitting at a desk. They have their own spot at the desk, and they write the choice on the piece of paper. And then each cardinal goes and delivers this piece of paper to an urn. They say a prayer. They say that this is my choice, that my conviction is behind this choice. And then there's a small team that counts the votes. And if we see the white smoke, that means that we have a pope. Very unlikely for that to happen today, but you never know. But these things usually take 2 to 3 days. The last 4 have taken roughly 2 to 3, but the longest in history, I think, was in the 12th century, went for like 3 years. I don't think we're going to see that. Yeah. 3 years, if you can imagine that.
We say the word conclave now and everyone goes right to think about the movie. And the movie gives you, and we've talked about this on the show before, outside of the plot lines of that movie, the ceremony, the process, how accurate is what they depict in that film?
This is a good question. And I've been reading a lot of the cardinals who are pushing back at the kind of nasty politicking side of things. A lot of them say that that's not really accurate, that there's more collegiality amongst the cardinals. But the film also quite accurately represented the formal process that I just described with the voting system and having to go up to the urn and you say a prayer and then there's a small team there. So it's a Hollywood movie. A lot of it is reflective of reality, and then sometimes it's maybe over dramatized to make a good storyline, to make it a little bit more dramatic.
My understanding, not nearly where yours is that the concept is God will put in the heart of each of these cardinals what to do, who to vote for. And so to see in the movie the politicking, I had never understood that happened. But I was always concerned with the idea that, well, if you feel that this is what's been put in your heart, you're going to keep writing the same name all the time. But there is a shift and the voting does change. What leads to the cardinals shifting position? Is it conversation? Is it meditation? Where does it come from, do you believe?
I'd say a combination of both, conversation and meditation. That's actually a nice way of putting it. So here's what's happening. There's going to be just one vote today, but tomorrow they'll have 2 votes in the morning. And if they don't have a winner, they break, and then they'll have 2 more in the afternoon. And during that break, you can imagine a lot of chatter is happening. And the film did show that. It did show those scenes. It almost looked like a big cafeteria and then kind of tables everywhere, and they're chit-chatting. So something like that is certainly happening. The politicking is inevitable, but I think the film kind of made it like there was a nasty politicking. And if I can say something here on a personal note, my dad asked me recently, he goes, "Did you watch the Conclave?" I said, "Not yet." And he said, "Do you know who the bad cardinal is?" And I said, "I do not." And he said, "It's Cardinal Tedesco," which is my mother's maiden name. So we had a pretty good laugh at that. He's like he's the arch villain, like a good movie needs that.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that that's how it's going to be playing out here over the next couple of days. There's more collegiality than people think. It's a religious experience too. Like they are being guided by what Catholics would refer to as the Holy Spirit and the goodness that comes with that. So, yeah, like with everything, it's a movie, and you take it with a little grain of salt.
The understanding that I have is that Pope Francis had put in place or replaced a number of cardinals. So this group possibly has not met like this before. A good number of them, more than I think it's 2/3, have not come together in this kind of way before and may not even know each other. With that kind of landscape, how do we pick who may be the front runners already? And do we have a sense for that out here?
Another great point. So with Francis, he put into place 82 of the 133 cardinals that are eligible to vote, which is very substantial. And he also brought in cardinals from the periphery of the church. So the countries that have not previously had cardinals. So even like Sweden has never had one, Haiti, Mongolia. And they've been in Rome for the last couple of days, chit-chatting with some of the more established figures within the Vatican, kind of like your celebrity cardinals, really, and those that have been deemed, at least by the media, as palpable. So right now, I'd say there's like 20 names that are being floated out there. I've been reading tons of different stories, and one thing keeps coming up by people who probably are experts in their own right. It's these things are notoriously difficult to predict. And even with Francis in 2013, like he was not one of these 20 type names that I just mentioned, the palpable candidates. So could it be someone who the media is not talking about? Sure. Could it be someone that the media talks about? Also, sure. So we shall see.
Craig, can a cardinal vote for themselves?
Another very good question. Yes, actually, they can. But it's obviously frowned upon.
Okay.
That would, Catholics are big into sin. Perhaps the word sin comes into play there. But also, there's no way of knowing if a cardinal does vote for himself, because once those paper ballots are put in the urn and mixed up, eventually that team right by the urn does announce each ballot, but those ballots cannot be tied to specific cardinals. So yes, they can. But and does it happen? I bet. I bet. Even in those moments, the ego will never disappear, will it? Even in a holy space like St. Peter's. But yes, they can.
I come out of the Orthodox Church, and whenever they make any vote, it has to be unanimous. But we're only dealing with 7 people voting. In something like this, what's the threshold to be then the Pope?
It's 2/3. So there's 133 electors at the moment. I can't do math in my head at the moment, but 2/3 of that 133. Okay. So that's it. It could be more than that majority, but that's what you need. You need 2/3, and only popes under the age of, only cardinals under the age of 80 are allowed to vote. So there are some votes, like there's the only cardinal in Ireland, for example, cannot participate in this because past the age of 80.
When you talk about that 2/3 rule and you look at the number of cardinals that Francis put in, should we assume that whoever gets chosen may very well be continuing the philosophies and beliefs of Francis as opposed to a massive right turn here?
Another very good question. And so here's what I've been thinking with Francis's nominees, those that he put into the College of Cardinal. A lot of them are from the periphery, but a lot of these countries in the global south and elsewhere may not be as open to some of the progressive pushes that Francis had made, especially on LGBTQ and same-sex issues. So here it's very interesting. This conclave is arguably the most diverse that the church has ever had, but that doesn't necessarily mean that some of these cardinals from Africa and the periphery of the church are going to get on board with some of these progressive elements. So it's going to be very interesting. We also don't know with Pope Francis, we don't know why he chose each of these cardinals. He may have chose them because they were strong on migrant rights, but they could also be more conservative when it comes to some of these social issues. So we shall see.
I guess I think it's hard for us in today's day and age to watch something like this progress, because we want to know after each vote who's in the lead, who's doing this, who's doing that. And like you said, they are sealed in. How do we get leaks from inside? And do you expect we will see some?
I'm not sure how we get leaks inside because, in addition to them having this oath of secrecy, the Vatican also disrupts airwaves around St. Peter's. So there's not going to be a signal. Wow. It's very, very unlikely and rare for information to get out. And this is part of the reason why everyone's so fascinated with the conclave, because they're so unpredictable in many different ways. And not a lot of intelligence, if we can call it that, or data is going to be leaked. Now, obviously, once we see the white smoke and we have a pope, then the media gets access back, and then we can start exploring perhaps why certain cardinals voted this way or that way. But we're not there yet.
You're listening to Hello Houston, and we're talking with Craig Considine of Rice University. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870.
To go back to this news blackout that we're going to be getting over the next few days while this goes on, what are you thinking about during that time? Is when we talk about like a trial by jury and the amount of time the jury's out, we start to formulate what we think they're doing. Any kind of that handicapping going on for you?
Yes, for sure. And I've been breaking this down, at least in my own mind, into three realms. We have a continuation of Pope Francis. I think if we get a vote today, unlikely, or even tomorrow, my guess is that it will be one of these more progressive cardinals. If it goes deep, if it goes like beyond 4 to 5 days, I think it could be a radical shift, which is someone like Cardinal Sarah from Guinea in Africa, who is very conservative with his orthodoxy and really has pushed back against Pope Francis. I think if it goes the normal 2-3, I think we might see someone who is more centrist, more moderate, someone who is acting more like a caretaker, and someone who may not be pushing anything drastic or dramatic. Like I read an article this morning, the Boston Globe, it said that prior to today's conclave, a lot of the cardinals were looking for someone to just steady the ship and to stay out of the limelight and focus on the church per se, rather than following what Pope Francis did, which was really made himself available to every conflict really in the world. So these are potential scenarios. And as I've been saying, we are patient. We'll see. We are patiently waiting. I know for me, real quick, I'm preparing for all three of these types of candidates. Right. How is it going to impact the world? How will it impact American society? How will it impact the church? So I've got a lot of homework to do, even though they're behind closed doors and we have really no idea what's going on.
I would assume, though, we know who the cardinals are. A lot of them publish, write, speak. So you can maybe have gauging ideas of where they sit. When you look at that grouping, are there certain themes that you see repeating over and over again that may be carried into the conclave?
I think the two big issues for the College of Cardinals is the sex abuse scandal, which a lot of cardinals are still quite upset about. They feel like, from what I've been reading, Francis kind of just glossed over it. Like he dealt with it at the beginning of his pontificate and then held a bunch of meetings and conferences in the Vatican and then kind of moved on to other things. So this is something that across this spectrum that I laid out is going to be there. And then I think also, as I mentioned earlier, the same-sex LGBTQ stuff is something that is going to be discussed in depth for sure. So those are the things that I think they all care about. And then when we get to certain factions, they're going to have their own nuances and their own particular areas where they want to focus on. But I think those are the two biggest things, but there's certainly other stuff too.
And we do have a question from YouTube. Najim would like to know, what if there is a tie?
I don't think there can be
Well,
a
it's
tie.
1/3.
You need 2/3.
Yeah,
Two-thirds. Okay, got it. Sorry, y'all both looked at me. I was like, I'm asking for Najim.
Yeah, there has to be 2/3.
Okay.
Once you hit the 2/3 threshold, then that is the Pope.
Got it. Okay, following along here.
Yeah, okay. We also have a caller on the line. Asada is with us from the 3rd Ward. What is your thoughts?
I just wanted to say, I wanted to remind everybody, I know we're talking about the politics of this moment, but there is a sacredness, and the fact that they have to distort signals, because we should all have reverence for people's ancient processes of choosing their spiritual leader. And I know we're talking politics, and I'm not even Catholic, right? But I have Catholics in my family. I've worked at Catholic institutions, and this is a very sacred moment. And I don't want to, make it like, Twitter and TikTok, who got a leak. And I think we should have some reverence. So much is no longer sacred in our society. We have such a little reverence for processes and moments of spirituality and faith that I just want to remind us, we're talking about, particularly people who are not Catholic, right, one of the most important moments in their lives. And let's keep a sense of reverence for people's faith in their spiritual walk. But
Asada,
but let's not make it all about the politics.
Yes, Asada, thank you very much for that. And I think that's a really strong point that I think we need to remember. As much as we talk about it and, in a sense, handicap the race, it's because we're looking at somebody who will be a leader of millions of people across the globe. And so it is a significant shift depending on who becomes their spiritual leader. But to go back to your point, and that brings up my point about how they go about choosing, it's supposed to be inspired by God. This is a sacred episode in the life of the church in which folks are to meditate and feel moved by the Spirit of God. It's something you can't really validate in a checklist of how it works and such. But I appreciate that comment and that thought on it. Craig, any thoughts that you have on that?
I would say amen to our previous caller.
Yeah,
I thought that was beautifully said. And let me say, too, when I got to my office this morning, I turned on Vatican news on YouTube, and I watched everything up until the oath and even the oath. And it was beautiful. They had music. It was in the Sistine Chapel. The order, the power. I mean, it's all there. And that can't be forgotten in this, as our caller said. Politics is certainly important, but this is a sacred moment, and these are sacred traditions that a ton of people hold extremely, extremely dear. I mean, even this morning when I was watching it, I was moved.
Yeah,
just moved by the formality of it and the power of it.
Craig, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today. And I'm sure we will want you back on once the white smoke comes up so we can have a better understanding of who is going to be leading all of the Catholics across the globe. It'll be fascinating to see how this evolves.
That's a date. I'll take you up on that. That sounds good.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. Thank you.
Craig Considine is an author and scholar of religion and interfaith dialogue at Rice University. Coming up on Hello Houston, Will Wright, Chief Creative Officer of Galveston Historical Foundation, tells us about the upcoming Galveston home tours. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
I want to make a movie about this.
The Arts Hour brings you film.
The themes in it are so far ahead of their time.
Books.
The detail is amazing.
Art.
There's all the personal stuff.
Theatre.
Lots of singing and dancing and colours.
Music.
The dance floor is made for dancing.
And everything in between.
I want it to be exciting.
That's the Arts Hour with me, Nikki Beatty.
I really identified with it.
From the BBC.
The Arts Hour, Friday nights at 9 on News 88.7.
Support comes from Downtown Houston Plus, with new businesses like Tenfold Coffee Company, Meow Wolf, Barbacana, Punchline Comedy Club, and Bubble Boba. Details at downtownhouston.org. Support comes from Houston Center for Contemporary Craft, presenting Sonia Clark, We Are Each Other, a solo exhibition featuring large-scale, community-centered works by the fiber artist. More at crafthouston.org.
Support comes from the Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center, offering comprehensive cancer care that is compassionate, personalized, and driven by clinical research. More at stlukeshealth.org/cancer.
Support comes from Serverless Solutions, aligning businesses with technology, including cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and cloud-based infrastructure. More information is available at serverless-solutions.com.
Houston Public Media brings to you PBS World. Experience the personal connection behind the headlines, with programming devoted to telling stories that humanize complex issues. PBS World on TV 8.6 and online at houstonpublicmedia.org. Support comes from Alley Theater, presenting Primary Trust, a story of friendship, change, and second chances. When Kenneth loses his longtime job, quiet nights at the Tiki Bar spark a journey of transformation. May 2nd through May 25th. Tickets at alleytheater.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. Call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org to get your comment in on today's topics. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
This weekend, the Galveston Historical Foundation will hold public tours of privately owned homes as part of their annual Galveston Historic Homes Tour. This year will feature tours of 9 houses that have strong stories and ties into the 1900 storm for its 125th anniversary, as well as some that tie into the Great Fire of 1885 for its 140th anniversary. With us now to tell us more is Will Wright, the Chief Creative Officer of the Galveston Historical Foundation. Will, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Will, can't you find some more fun moments to tie into? It seems pretty bleak. No, I think it's fascinating that there is connection still to that past, which in some ways feels so far away.
It does. You know, when you talk about Galveston and its history, the 1900 storm is the biggest connection that people have to the island. It's something that they're continuously interested in. They want to know what happened. They want to know the stories of the people that survived and the stories of the people that didn't, and they want to learn. And sometimes that's through a personal family connection, and sometimes that's just through an appreciation of Galveston itself. But this is a great way outside of the death and destruction to look at that. But when you have an anniversary, it gives us a chance to kind of look at things in a little bit different way as well.
House-wise, what do we have that still exists from the fire?
So one of the things that Galveston is really unique for is our collection of pre-1900 homes. We have one of the largest collection of homes in the United States of per capita of those houses. So to be able to have that architectural history in that quantity is really, really special. It's not something that happens everywhere. And it's something that really has become, I think one of Galveston's calling cards. So for that, people frequently ask how many historic homes are in Galveston. There's not a database of that. We would estimate 30 or 40,000. Then we say that just through the age of the house. So there's different criteria, whether you're a house in a historic district or not. But Galveston has a lot of old homes and a lot of history that's associated with that.
So there are going to be how many houses on display where people can go and walk through and see?
Yeah, so every year, this is our 51st year to do the home store. And these are privately owned homes, so you can't be on the tour if you've been on in the last 10 years. And these are the houses.
So they're always fresh homes. It's not like they keep revisiting the same ones.
No,
it's not Bishop's Palace every year.
It's not. You can go to Bishop's Palace every day, and we hope you do. But in this instance, these are privately owned homes that people are making the consideration and the time to put out there. So there's usually 9 to 11 homes on tour. We have 9 this year. And I'm speaking to that both as a representative of the organization and as a homeowner on the tour. So our home is on the tour this year as well. So it's been a really nice way for us and for me to see kind of the other side of the tour as well and what goes into that.
And if I'm right, it started last weekend, so it was last weekend and this weekend.
It's always first 2 weekends in May.
So you've already had folks through your house.
Yes.
How does it feel to have tourists wandering through your life?
You know, we estimate we'll have between, on any given year, 3,000 to 5,000 people on the tour. And when we go out, you know, we ask people, you know, to get a house on the tour, there's kind of two different ways. We will go out and we'll ask someone, you know, hey, we'd really like to talk to you about putting your house on tour. Or we'll have people that say, I've been putting a lot of work into the house. I'd like to be considered for it. But there's two ways people go with that. Either they're totally fine with thousands of people coming through their home when they're not there, or they politely say, you know what, it's just not for us. I totally respect both sides of that. But you know, for me, I'm busy working, so I'm not at the house, you know, and we encourage the homeowners, you know, go have fun. We put you up at the hotel, give you tickets to the tour, but go explore. Don't stay at the house because it's a little strange sometimes.
Sure.
You know, you're seeing a lot of people go through and they love seeing the houses, but it's
you know what I
unique
want to
experience.
ask? I want to know how you prepare your house for it, because I'm in horrible fear anyone would want to bring tourists.
You
through
throw
my
everything in the
house.
closet.
Yeah, I mean, how did you get ready to have thousands of people wander through your life?
You know, just speaking for ourselves, it was a combination of, it was an excuse or an opportunity for us to really do some work on the house that we've wanted to do for a long time. But, you know, you've got to make sure it's ready for people to come see. So, you know, there's a lot of interior work that people are doing. They're doing minor repairs, or they're redecorating a little bit, or, you know, each house is different. You know, you've got small houses up to grand Victorian houses. Each one's going to be unique to that.
Yeah, all I can say is obviously you keep a cleaner house than I do. I thought that's what you were going to say. Oh, it's pushing everything in a closet.
Yeah. So if you become a historically named home in Galveston, are there certain requirements that you'll have to be, you know, keep up with to keep that title?
So for Galveston, the Historical Foundation doesn't oversee any official designations of historic homes. That's done largely through historic districts, and that's kind of a separate thing from us. But to be on the homes tour, there's really not. You know, there's things that we're going to look for that have some architectural interesting pieces to it, or maybe it's a house that has a very strong narrative to it. And so the builder of it, for example, might be someone notable. The family that built the house might be something that's notable. We're not only there to tell the story, or to, you know, showcase the house. We're really wanting to use this as a way for people to learn a little bit about Galveston, about the people that, you know, created the community, that built in the community, and those houses kind of serve that purpose as well.
And about,
sorry.
I was just say, well, about how many people will walk through these tours?
Over the course of both weekends, usually on any given year, it's 3,000 to 5,000 people.
So a little more specifics. What houses are we going to see, or what should we keep our eye out for if we're on the tour?
There's a great collection of, you know, 8 out of the 9 houses are all built before 1900, and that was done specifically to tie into the anniversary of the 1900 storm. The 9th house is a restoration in progress that is one of the Historical Foundation's own properties that we recently had moved via a barge. It was donated to us. We wanted to keep the house, so we moved the house onto a barge and we floated it over to its new home. This is a couple weeks ago. So now people that had saw it on a boat, a temporary houseboat, get to come and tour that as well. And that's going to be an example of kind of some sustainability in how we repurpose those homes. But outside of that, you're going to see everything from an old brothel to a huge Victorian house, some smaller cottages, some of the East End houses. The East End is one of the historic districts that people really associate with Galveston architecture. So it's a nice cross section of a lot of different types of houses, but 8 out of 9 of those built before 1900.
With the small number of homes that you actually have on the tour, considering the number of homes there, are you curating it to tell a story of this group of houses, besides the fact of how old they are? But is there something you want us to learn as we walk through?
For this year in particular, it's really tied to the 1900 storm. So when you go on the tour, you're going to get a program, a catalog that's kind of your ticket, but it's a booklet that has a much more researched history of each of the properties. And in those, we're talking about the 1900 storm. We're talking about what happened to those properties in the 1900 storm. We're talking about the people that lived there, and whether that's 1900 storm or in some cases the 1885 fire. Really just want, you know, in a perfect world, people to leave the tour and feel like, one, they enjoyed it, I mean, we want people to come have fun. We don't want you to feel like you're getting a history lesson unless you really want to go down that deep with it. But enjoy the tour, and then maybe come away with a little bit of a deeper connection to Galveston and kind of some of the things that make it really, really fantastic.
Thank you. Fascinating.
Will Wright is the Chief Creative Officer of the Galveston Historical Foundation. Will, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Really good to be here.
If
Thank
people
you.
ever wanted to wander through your home, this is the chance.
This is the chance.
It's your one chance.
And that brings us to the end of our show. Frank will be back tomorrow, and we want to thank you for listening to Hello Houston. We'll be back with more conversations right here on News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altine, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.